In this unit, we explore the unraveling of the United States during the 1970s. This was an era when the fragile consensus that had held the nation together fell apart. It was not one issue that pulled the nation apart, but many. The country was divided over the war in Vietnam, the emerging movement for women's rights, the struggles for rights of gay Americans, and the crisis that was gripping American cities. The 1960s was a time of urban rioting in many cities, as minority populations rebelled against situations of dire poverty, hopelessness, discrimination, and police brutality. Most famously in Los Angeles in August of 1965, nearly a week of rioting in Watts was sparked by a police action. 34 would end up dead, over 1,000 would be injured, and over $40 million in damage would be done during the riots. The nation was coming apart indeed, and violently it seemed. In 1963, there had been 16,000 American troops in Vietnam. By 1968, that number had topped 500,000. The war was broadcast into the living rooms of the nation, showing Americans for the first time a war up close and in real time. That year, Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, triggering more urban riots. In June, Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated as well. Vice President Hubert Humphrey would run on the Democratic ticket, since Lyndon Johnson opted not to run for re-election. The Republicans nominated Richard Nixon. Nixon saw himself as a representative for the so-called silent majority. That group was made up of those peaceful, law-abiding Americans who were being lost in the social turmoil of the time. When he was running for president in 1968, Republican candidate Nixon had told voters that he had a secret plan to end the Vietnam War. Once he was elected, he revealed that plan to the nation. His policy was known as Vietnamization, and it was based on the idea that American troops would gradually withdraw from Vietnam. At the same time, South Vietnamese troops would gradually take over the fighting. They would be supported by American bombing campaigns. But Vietnamization did not limit the war, nor did it bring an end to the anti-war movement. In early 1970, Nixon sent American troops into neutral Cambodia in order to disrupt the supply lines to South Vietnam. The invasion ended up destabilizing the Cambodian government, bringing to power a government that would massacre millions of people. The invasion of Cambodia would also trigger the largest student protests in American history. The best remembered of these student protests took place at Kent State University in Ohio. There, 4 protesters were killed by the Ohio National Guard. The protesters were unarmed, and some were shot in the back. Less than 2 weeks later, a similar demonstration was held at Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. There, a conflict erupted between the police and the student protesters. The police shot and killed 2 protesters and injured several more. Similar demonstrations were held at colleges and universities across the country. In all, more than 350 campuses witnessed demonstrations. Nearly 24 campuses were occupied by troops. Within the military, morale was also becoming difficult to maintain. The draft applied to all young American men, but most college students received deferments. This situation led to feelings of unfairness and bitterness for some draftees who saw that the Army was made up mostly of minorities and working-class whites. The women's movement, also known as second-wave feminism, had touched off a major revolution in the 1960s. By the 1970s, though, the movement would be stalled on several issues, most famously the Equal Rights Amendment. The ERA had been first proposed in the 1920s, calling for equality of rights under the law, regardless of sex. The amendment was revived by feminists in the 1970s, and it passed quickly through the Congress in 1972. When the amendment went out to the states for ratification, however, it sparked a backlash. Some argued that such equal rights would mean that men would not have to provide financially for their families. Others worried that women might also be subject to any wartime draft. Although most Americans did support the amendment, it did not receive the approval from 38 states that it needed to become law. And even today, it has still not been approved. Another social movement that began in the 1960s was that for gay liberation. Gay and lesbian Americans had formed clubs and associations during the 1950s, but they had not staged protests or demonstrations. At that time, the psychiatric profession considered homosexuality a disorder, as they would until 1973. And most states considered gay acts illegal. Even in cities like New York and San Francisco, police routinely closed down gay bars to harass the customers. As a result, most gay and lesbian Americans did not advertise their sexual orientation. In the language of the time, they stayed in the closet. All of that began to change, though, in 1969. New York City police officers raided the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in the West Village neighborhood of Manhattan. On most occasions, the customers had peacefully complied with such raids. On that night, however, they fought back, bringing media attention to the situation and sparking a sense of outrage amongst other gays and lesbians. New York City's Gay Pride Parade commemorates this courageous action each year. As the nation moved through and out of the 1970s, it would see social progress on many fronts. A rise of the business culture and the Republicans who supported it would also be apparent.